Fatty and I both did Rebecca's GiddyUp challenge recently. The baked potato for me. That's about 5,300 feet of climbing in the bag. And what was it for you again, Fatty?
Yeah, for Lisa and me, it was the mashed potato, about 16,000 feet of climbing. It took us more than 9 hours. That is a long day in the saddle.
Oh, it's practically a Leadville day for you. And, what was the first thing we did right after our respective efforts? We headed straight for our Floyd's of Leadville recovery products. I needed a good rub down, so it was the Cooling Blend Balm for me and its full spectrum CBD. 5 climbs up West Ridge Fire Road to achieve my goal, and a couple dabs of balm on the legs to get the legs out of their state of shock.
Yeah, I used my new best friend, the warming balm, before the ride, actually, on the Achilles, my calves, my hamstrings, knees, and quads. I tell you what, Hottie, warming up with Floyd's before a big ride has made the early parts of my big training days so much better. And afterward, Lisa and I had Floyd's Recovery Mix milkshakes. That's a scoop of vanilla mix, a scoop of the chocolate mix, 2 scoops of vanilla bean ice cream, some whole milk, and fire up the blend deck. It was a combination of a great recovery drink and a dessert.
Well, no matter your goal, no matter your effort, rest and recovery should always be part of the plan. So make sure you have plenty of Floyd's of Leadville product close by, because the faster you get your body into recovery mode, the sooner you can get back to your next baked potato or mashed potato or scallop potatoes or potatoes au gratin, Everesting, Kilimanjaroing, Denaliing, whatever.
Yeah, Denali, that's hard to say. Floyd's of Leadville has all kinds of CBD goodies to get your rest and recovery dialed in so you can smash that next effort. Head to floydsofleadville.com and use the code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount on all your orders. And thanks, Floyd's of Leadville, for sponsoring the show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Floyd's of Leadville. Season 3, episode 11 now, the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I'm Michael Houghton, Hottie to most.
And I'm Eldon Nelson, but most people call me Fatty. On this show, we are bringing back a very popular guest from last season, and that is mountain bike skills coach Lee McCormack. Hottie interviewed Lee at Sea Otter last season, and we were going to have him do the same this year, but of course there was no Sea Otter. Instead, we tracked him down at his home near Boulder, Colorado.
And we have an update on Lee's clinics that we'll get to just prior to the interview. But since this show will be mostly about descending, Fatty, let's focus on our question of the week, that is on ascending. As in the climbing challenge thrown down by our good friend Rebecca Rush and her Giddy Up for Good weekend.
All right, we're doing Giddy Up for Good is officially going. Started at midnight last night, going till Monday, and had to give you guys some cowbell.
She was on the show prior to the event, and that's when both you and I committed to one of her 4 challenges. So, what was yours and how did it go?
Yeah, so Lisa and I did the mashed potato, and it had a requirement of 16,000 feet of climbing, but we did 17,000 feet because I am averse, I guess you could say, to starting a climb and not finishing it. And since each of our laps had about 1,250 feet of climbing, that meant our final lap overshot our goal by a fair amount. And get this, Hottie. We rode for about 9 hours and 103 miles. It felt like doing the Leadville 100, both in terms of time, distance, and climb. I really loved it. Lisa and I actually linked our AirPods to the same phone. And so we were, for, say, the middle third of the ride, we were listening to a novel and a book on tape together. And that was something kind of new and a not bad way to spend several hours together, grinding up hills and then pausing for the downhills after you've run out of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, the point of this ride and race and challenge was to obviously raise money for COVID-19 relief. But one of the bonuses was what you got out of it. I think what a lot of people got out of it, which was they got an event to do. They had a goal, they had a target. They were able to like gear up, get ready for something, get up in the morning, have your breakfast, get in your routine, go out and do your thing, right? And so it kind of had a nice little race feel to it, even though we were not all lining up at the same place together. Mine was the baked potato, that being the least of the four evils. It ended up being 5 climbs of the Westridge Fire Road in the Santa Monica Mountains, a very popular trail here. I had company with fellow Leadviller Mark Prince also doing the challenge, so we kept each other going. I think we were done in under 5 hours. Our pace was leisurely, let's say. So we took our time, had a nice conversation while we were going, said hi to people. I think people eventually started noticing, a lot of hikers on this trail, that these two guys are up to something. I mean, up and down Westridge Fire Road, and sure enough, we got our gig done. We were very happy in the end. In fact, the baked potato event, which I did, was won by a former guest on the show, somebody you know quite well, Nate Whitman. Knocked it out.
Of course it was.
Yeah, of course it was. In under 2 hours, he did his 5,400 feet of climbing in under 2 hours. Pretty cool.
That guy.
Yeah, pretty impressive leaderboard, Fatty, for the day, too. The male winner for the Everesting Challenge, Jules Googly, 29,000 feet in under 10 hours, 9 hours and 40 minutes.
So fast.
I know. Katie Hall, the female winner, 10 hours, just about 10 and a half hours for an Everesting Challenge.
And that was a record, I believe. That was the fastest women's Everest ever done. So that was kind of an awesome and, for me at least, unexpected, cool thing from that race.
And Rebecca has a whole leaderboard up on the webpage, by the way, if you want to check out how people did. And she's still, I think, as of this recording, still calculating all the numbers of the folks who entered. Now, our hostess, Rebecca Rush, did the full Everest on her home road, Trail Creek, the same one used in Rebecca's private Idaho. That's the opening climb. She rode through the night, and it was cool to cold the whole time. She was essentially in full dress, Fatty, leggings, booties, gloves, the works. And after a day's recovery, the Queen of Pain was still feeling it.
Giddy up for good. The day after my Everesting challenge, you guys can see my face is a little puffy. I'm a little tired, but I am so really inspired and energized by what happened this weekend. I know it's we had 4 days of Rebecca's Giddy Up for Good with all of you climbing all around the world. So many miles and meters, and it was so cool. Obviously, I was checked out for nearly 24 hours. My challenge took 23 hours and 15 minutes, something like that. To do 29,029 feet. It was long, and through the night I'm exhausted, but I felt good the whole time. I felt energized by everyone else who was out there.
This event is just another reason of many reasons to support someone like Rebecca Rush. I mean, this idea kind of came out of nowhere, and she put it together very quickly. And, just basically, she gets off the Iditarod Trail, which would have sent most people into hibernation for months. And instead, she's planning this challenge. 900 riders, better than $100,000 raised and counting. I think 10 million feet of climbing. Mind-boggling numbers. Great work, great cause, great woman. And Hottie and I were super glad that we could be part of it. Hottie, one of the things I really liked about doing the Giddy Up Challenge is something you mentioned, the feeling that you were racing again, the pre-race anxiety, the can I do it, the intensity, all of that. And it was just great to have an intense race field day in the saddle, suffering a little in the good way. I love that, whether I'm training or racing. I want to have fun, I want it to be intense, and I do not want to be hurting in the wrong way. And, the bad kind of hurt, the kind of hurt that doesn't get better as you get stronger. Because if I'm hurting, I'm not having fun, which means I'm not able to push myself or ride with the focus or intensity that I love about training and racing. And, that a couple of years ago, our sponsor Shimano solved the single most intense, significant, chronic pain problem I have ever had on a bike. Guess what product that was that fixed this pain?
Well, I can think of a number of possible answers here. You have XTR brakes as a possibility, SPD pedals, Di2 shifting. Is it any of those?
those have actually been important parts of my riding enjoyment. But no, I kind of misled you on the question. It is actually not something that goes on the bike. It's something that goes on my feet. It is the Shimano S-Fire shoes. I recently realized that whether I'm on a mountain bike or road bike, in spite of the fact that I think probably like you, own dozens of pairs of cycling shoes, I never ever wear anything but the Shimano S-Fires. The reason is super simple. I have no pain when I wear those shoes. People's feet change shape over time. And for more than a year, I was suffering so much with every single kind of shoe I tried. I was seriously thinking I might need to give up cycling. And then I tried the wide foot Shimano S-Fire, and suddenly, like a light switch, no more pain, and I love riding again. Now, of course, shoes are like saddles. It's impossible to guarantee that what works for me is going to work for you. But I will say that these shoes fit me better than any shoe I have ever had. And I will also say that my wife, Lisa, who does not have wide feet, loves her S-Fire shoes, and she no longer wears any of her other MTB shoes. And my stepson, Blake, also now is wearing S-Fire shoes. And my stepdaughter's boyfriend, Jeff, also wearing S-Fire shoes. You see a pattern here?
Yeah, I think I see the pattern. Mrs. Hottie is also wearing Shimano shoes now, but in fact, she has 2 pairs of Shimano shoes.
Yeah.
But that's a topic for another promo. I have a pair of Shimano shoes.
Yeah.
But again, topic for another promo. For now, let's just say that if your feet are hurting after a long day on the bike, be sure to check out the Fatty-approved Shimano S-Fires at bike.shimano.com.
Yep, and it is worth mentioning, they have a lot of sizes and half sizes. And of course, this mattered very much to me. They have lots of these sizes in wide. So there's a good chance that you will find an S-Fire that really fits. And that matters so much to ride quality. Check them out, as he said, at bike.shimano.com.
Like I said, I did my Rebecca's GiddyUp challenge with a friend and fellow Leadville racer, Mark Prince. And during our ride, we talked about his remaining goal at Leadville. And like a lot of us, improving that finish time is tops for Mark. And as far as how to get or achieve that goal, Mark said something that doesn't come up often. I mean, of course, he said he needed to be faster in the feeds, but he also said he needs to be faster on the downhills. And Fatty, the more I think about Leadville, the more I have come to believe that the descents are one of the pillars to finishing well. Yeah, you've got training, nutrition, climbing, pacing, and rest coming into the event, but I would put right there with those, getting down Powerline, getting down Columbine, and getting down Sugarloaf. You got to nail those too.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Those descents are an area I committed to improving for myself this summer. And I think I've been giving away time on the downhills in the last 20 plus years I've been doing this. Not a lot of time, but I'm not really looking for much either to set a PR. So minutes and even seconds matter. And even for the folks looking for bigger chunks of time off their total race, getting down with efficiency without wasting energy on anxiety, without having a death grip on your grips, without losing spots is truly key. And for those reasons and much more, we have mountain bike skills coach Lee McCormack back. Lee puts on clinics, does one-on-one coaching, and is the author of Mastering Mountain Bike Skills, which is now in its 3rd edition.
When we recorded with Lee, we were all locked down. Leadville had not been canceled, but Lee's in-person training was on hold at the time we did this interview. Good news, though, Lee is booking classes again. Go to leelikesbikes.com to see his schedule. If you can't get to Lee or you're still in stay-at-home mode, Lee is also doing remote coaching. It's all there on his website, so check that out. But again, this interview was done as the crisis was peaking, so put our conversation into that context. I think it still doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, we talk a lot about the features of the race, the Leadville Trail 100. That is not happening this summer, of course, but the points are still well taken and still useful for whatever event you find yourself in next.
I see 3 places that this course really is going to challenge anyone who has erroneously come to the day expecting that they are going to be able to just take what road skills they have, and a good set of legs and lungs, and not worry about being tested. So, Lee, that's really what I want to talk to you about is the power line descent. I want to talk about coming down the first couple of miles of Columbine, and then the final tricky descent of the day, Sugarloaf. And I'll do a little bit of setup because if I understand right, have you? I don't think you've ever raced Leadville yet, right?
No, sir, no.
Well, shame on you. Let's get you out there.
I'd like to. It'd be fun to do. It'd be a good experience.
It would be an awesome experience, and you would kill it, is my expectation. But so I'm going to give you a little bit of setup. Plus, a lot of our listeners aren't going to know exactly what these segments are. But let's talk about the first tricky technical piece of the day. About 20 miles into the race, you hit what I would call the most exciting, if you're ready for it, the funnest, and for sure the fastest descent of the day. It's the power line. You're going to be coming back up this sucker in mile 80, but for the first time you see it, you are going to start after your big Sugarloaf climb with forested double track, light sort of flashing into your eyes, because of the sun is sort of stippling through the trees. There are lots of embedded rocks, a few little creek water crossings, and then it slowly transitions into decomposed sandy granite, usually wide open, couple of off-camber, unbanked curves, a lot of the times ruts in the trail where rain has carved in ruts and banks. Because it's early in the race, you can also count on a lot of people being around you, whether you are a super fast guy or a super slow guy. There are other people, there are hundreds of other people who are your same speed. And so you're going to have people who are faster at you at descending and people you are faster than descending. So a lot of things going on. I always see people fixing flats there. So with all of this in mind, what are the tips and strategies you would give me for being safe and fast in this big descent early in the race?
That's a really good question. And there's a lot to unpack there, right? So first of all, like if you're dealing with traffic, of course, you're not going to win that race in that section, but you could lose it there, right? So we don't want to mess up, right? We don't want to crash. And we don't want to go slower than we need to. And we don't want to burn energy with our endocrine system. Like we don't want to be freaked out and tense, because it just eats up our important hormones and it beats you up in a way you don't need. So one thing I would say is line choice. It's really, really common. So is it fair to say that people are trying to avoid the embedded rock gardens?
They're places where you can sort of dance your way around and through some of the rock gardens. And there are times when there is really no choice but to kind of go through a little bit. But yeah, people will dodge.
So I would guess, so say you get there and and the people who are faster than you, they're going to pass you, mm-hmm. Right? So they're not part of your world. Right? Like for those people, all you got to do is be predictable and not just like veer to one side or like slam your brakes all of a sudden.
So vital, right? Predictable. That's a great tip right there.
Yeah. Be predictable. It's not unlike being in a pack on a road bike, I suppose, where it's just like, the people who are behind you are counting on you to be predictable. So follow clean lines. Don't do anything crazy. Don't just stop. Right? That's really bad for everybody. That's really bad. The other thing, so then what we're talking about now is like, if you're coming up on people who are more afraid than you are, who are slower than you are, they can really disrupt you, like pretty badly. So what we want to do is we want to go places where those people are not. Okay? And so that's why I asked about the rock gardens, because most of those people are going to do everything they can to avoid rocks. But what I'm here to tell you is that it's often faster and simpler and safer just to go straight. Go over the rocks. Like, do not avoid the rocks. Like, go straight. Go places where other people are not. Because you can imagine, like, if there's a set of rocks and the trail meanders between them, that's a lot of braking and a lot of turning. And that's a lot of stuff to manage, right? But where if you just go straight, there's some pumping going on, and it's just simpler, right? It's just simpler. So I think that's my first bit of advice is to open your eyes up, look for places where other people are not, and go around them, you know? And I think we're going to talk about passing at some point maybe, but I call it a 0-calorie pass, when you can pass another racer without expending any extra energy.
Right. And you want to avoid wasting energy in this race. And you made such a great point earlier on, that it is so easy to bring a huge load of nerves into this segment of the course, because it is one of the iconic moments in the race, right? And folks worry about, am I going to get down through this without crashing, without blowing a tire? And maybe that's my next question for you in this is there have been years when I've seen 8 to 10 people on the side of the trail working on pinch flats. Do you have a general guidance on getting down with your tires intact?
Man, oh man, like being smooth, right?
Tell me what you mean by that.
By being smooth, I mean pumping, and the basics of pumping are basically managing your body weight or your pressure to match the trail. So, for example, this is very simplistic, and we can get into more detail. But if there is a shape that's a downslope that goes away from you, right? You want to be heavy in that shape, because that gives you propulsion, pumping propulsion. If there's a shape that faces towards you, like the front of a rock, then you want to be light there. And so what people are doing when they pinch flat is they're tense, right? And they're just smashing through stuff, and their back tire is catching that and pinching. So if you were to cycle, this is the simplest version of pumping. If you were to oscillate your weight as if you're kind of like on a trampoline or a diving board, right? If you oscillate your weight and kind of match the train, you're going to massively reduce the number of pinch flats you get.
Yeah. The other thing, Lee, that happens in this section is you've got morning light, so the sun's still kind of low, dust, so vision's impaired by both light in your eyes and dust. And what tends to happen in these rough sections, especially at the top of the power line descent, when you first start going down, is you start grabbing the bars or the grips tighter. It's a natural reaction, right? So, I mean, there may be no good answer for this, but how do we stay loose enough, yet not lose control of our bicycles as we're popping through these rock gardens?
So, okay, here are a few thoughts. You're right. Like when you're under stress, you're going to naturally squeeze the bars tighter. Like that's just a human thing, right? And if a dog had opposable thumbs, I'm sure it would squeeze the bars tighter too, One thought is this, okay? You should not control your bike with your hands for the most part. You should control your bike with your feet. All of your body weight should be in your feet at all times. So that means no leaning forward, no leaning back. When you are, raise your hand if you're a human being. I see. Okay, got it. If you're a human being and you go and you get into a sketchy situation, especially a situation that you've been like watching on YouTube for a year and worrying about and listening to podcasts about and fretting over, right? Or maybe you crashed there last year or flatted there last year, like, you're going to instinctively do what humans do, which is take your head and you're going to like push your head up and away from the perceived danger, right? Which is going to put your weight too far back on the bike. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a constant tension between the handlebars and your fingers. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then when you're hanging back like that, everything that happens to your handlebar is going to happen to your head. Right? Does that make sense? Because like you're tracking, like there's this traction between your bar and your grip. And so when you hit a bump, your head will jostle upward. When your bike drops into a hole, your head will jostle forward.
Absolutely.
And when your head is jostling around, right, all the gyroscopes and computers are in your brain there, well, in your head. And your inner lizard is like, oh my God, something's wrong here. right? And so is it going to make you more balanced and more gentle, or more unbalanced and more tense?
Well, tense for sure.
It's going to make you more tense, right? So like we have to really do our best to maintain what I call tea party fingers, or light hands, heavy feet, right? So everywhere you go, climbing, everywhere, like the more tired you get, the more you're going to grip those bars. So when you get into these descents, like loosen your fingers, put all your body weight in your feet, and do whatever it takes to keep your hands light. This is important. Like when I used to work at like a .com, and I had a different life before, right? And I quit my job to write the first definitive book on mountain biking. And I went through so much consternation trying to figure out the equation for where to put my body in different riding situations, like braking, rocks, downhill. What do you do? And I was so stressed out, I gave myself the shingles. It was so stressful. If you think having a high-powered job is stressful, try not having a job. That's worse, right? So anyway, but it finally hit me. I was like, dude, if your hands are weightless, you're solving the equation. Like if you're in your feet and your bike is tracking the angle changes and your hands are light, you're cool. And this is important. When your hands are light, your hands can move independently from your eyeballs. And so when your hands are moving independently from your eyeballs, you're not getting that stress response and that subconscious like tension. Does that make sense? So the biggie here is, right, like get in your low attack position, your hinge, which we'll talk about more probably, and keep your hands light. So that's step one. Step two, okay, like have you guys ever done a pogo stick?
Sure. When I was a kid.
Okay. So you remember, like when you're bouncing on a pogo stick, it's not that hard to balance, is it? Because balancing is dynamic. When you are standing still on the pogo stick, it's really hard to balance, right? And you get a lot of upper body tension, don't you?
Yeah.
So like if you watch video of really good downhillers or enduro guys, or women too, like you're going to notice that they always have this playful little bounce with their feet. There's this little oscillation. And again, it goes back to the idea that you're kind of like you're testing out a diving board. You're just testing out a diving board, right? And you're like trying to feel what the oscillation frequency of the diving board is. And then you're going to give a big bounce and give a big belly flop, right? So when you're on the bike, right, you're going to keep your hands light and you're going to carry this little oscillation. And not only does that oscillation help you pump the trail, right? But it also dynamically keeps you more balanced. And you guys can try that next time you're out riding. Just give it a little oscillation, and you're going to notice that like the more you intentionally drive energy into your feet, the less energy your hands have to deal with. And this is so important because your hands are attached to your freaking head. And that's where the gyroscopes are, and that's where the lizard lives. So if you can come into these sections and just maintain balance and maintain engagement with your feet, that's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Hottie, bashing down the top section of the Powerline descent seems like a great opportunity to talk about what you are holding on to in these most crucial of moments. I mean, picture it. You still have riders around you. There are rocks and ruts to avoid. You can't see too well. And at that moment, bike control is paramount.
Yeah, that's why you want to have your hands on a pair of NV bars. The Powerline descent starts with a jarring affair and finishes with some tricky and fast switchbacks. Your ability to aim your bike precisely where you intend to is a must. And that's why having bars like the M5 or M6 can help set you up for success.
Yeah, it's this moment in particular that I want to know my bars are dialed, because anything less could spell disaster. With my NV M5s cut to my right length, I know that I can get into my proper attack position just like Lee would want me to be, so I can get through the traffic, miss the ruts, absorb the bumps of the Powerline descent. There's nothing else that's going to do it for me when I am on this section of the Leadville course.
Sure, there's no Powerline this year, but we know many of you will be out there testing the limits on some fast and choppy sections like the Powerline descent. So do yourself a favor and mount some NV bars on that steed. Check out NV's handlebars and the rest of their components at Enve, that's ENVE.com.
Hottie, I also recently made a huge purchase, a Martin purchase from the feed.
Right. You pretty much bought a year's worth of their drink mix and gels.
Yeah, that was my full-on intent. And I want to talk about the gels part for a second. We've talked about the drink a lot, but the Morton caffeinated gel, which in the typical Morton way is descriptively named Gel 100 Caf 100. Not super creative.
Yeah, 100 calories and 100 milligrams of caffeine. That's a lot more caffeine than most gels.
Yeah, it really is. Basically, it's about an 8-ounce cup of coffee's worth of caffeine, which is not an outrageous amount on its own, but it's also not trivial. You don't want to use the caffeinated Morton gel as your only source of calories.
Yeah, yikes. Our friends at the feed tell us that caffeine hits you fast in just 5 to 15 minutes, and it sticks with you for a while, peaking about 45 minutes after you take it, with effects diminishing in a few hours.
Yeah, and that caffeine makes a difference too. It increases your athletic performance, and more importantly, it helps reduce mental fatigue. As all endurance athletes know, the mental game is a huge part of endurance racing.
So here's how the feed recommends using this powerful tool in a big endurance race. Wait till the turnaround, so that in our case would be the top of column line, before you start using these caffeinated gels, and then alternate maybe 2 regular gels for every 1 caffeinated gel.
Yeah, and keep a ceiling on how many you're going to even have in your jersey pocket. You don't want to take more than 3 or 4 of these during the race. There's definitely a thing as too much caffeine.
And of course, how habituated you are to other caffeine is going to affect how much of the caffeinated Morton gel you want to use.
Yeah, I'm a quad shot espresso guy every single morning, so I tend to use the maximum allowed of any kind of caffeinated tool. Whatever amount you use, though, remember, don't experiment on race day, and go conservative, honestly, with the Morton caffeinated gel. It has a serious kick. And as a caffeine junkie, I kind of got to say, I really like the added sharpness the caffeine adds to the taste of the gel.
You can get Morton products or anything at the feed at a 15% discount by signing up at thefeed.com/Leadville.
Yeah, and give the caffeinated Morton gels a try midway through a big ride. See how you feel. My guess is you're going to want one next year at Twin Lakes inbound, maybe another one at the base of Powerline, and maybe one more at the bottom of the final big paved climb up to Carter's. The feed can help you and also get you a great price on everything they sell by signing up at thefeed.com/Leadville.
All right, now back to mountain bike skills coach Lee McCormack and the lessons we can learn about descending from a similar sport. Lee, I've often thought about it this way. Tell me if I'm right or wrong, but when I'm thinking about riding, it's funny about mountain biking, first of all. I mean, folks who go out to learn to ski, and I'm going to get to the skiing thing here in a second. I mean, generally, we take lessons first to ski. But when we get on a mountain bike, why isn't we don't get lessons first? I've never quite understood that, but that's a whole nother topic. But I want to take up the skiing analogy real quick. Like when we're taught to ski, right? We're taught to deliver the energy and absorb the energy through our legs and feet and keep our upper body and our head as still as possible and pointed down the fall line. Are the concepts similar when you get into these rough sections on a mountain bike course like the Powerline descent?
100%. Yes. And as a matter of fact, like there are a lot of Leadville riders who might not be confident mountain bike descenders, but they did go to ski class when they were kids and they're really good on snow. You know, like the people who have like condos and Vail, those kinds of guys and women. And yeah, like if you're confident on snow, I want you to understand that the core dynamics of pressure and release and of edging and of pumping are the same on snow and on dirt. It's exactly the same.
That's good to know, Fatty, because that'll get us down Powerline. Are you down Powerline now? I feel like I'm getting down to the bottom of this thing in a better fashion than normal.
See, I'm picturing that we are down through the first part of Powerline, but Powerline is the characteristics change drastically after you have done the first part and you come out of the trees, and now it's no longer embedded rocks. Now it is this decomposed granite, sandy, wide open dirt road where you can pick up a ton of speed, but you also have to be really careful with some of the bends because they were made with, slow moving service trucks in mind, not with mountain bikers in mind. So it gets rutted and there is not a lot of banking, if any at all. There's one that I swear is an off-camber turn, and that is pretty freaky to hit at 25 miles an hour on sand, right? So with that very different characteristic, are there particular special things that we ought to be paying attention to?
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, always go with speed that you can manage. Mm-hmm. You should never, ever, if you're a grown-up, ever go so fast that you're just holding on for dear life. Like, that's not acceptable. Don't do it. So go with speed you can manage. Remember, we're already kind of doing this pogo stick, like loading and unloading stuff.
Right.
When you brake on, that surface, there's not much braking traction, is there?
There's not. I mean, you're not on ball bearings, but there's definitely a loose, decomposed granite, sandy feel to it, and it's a loose surface.
So it's a loose surface. So I would say is, and we can talk about braking technique whenever you guys want, but like at the basic level, like when it's time to brake in a heavy phase. So just like how how to bounce on your bike and make these like waves, like heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, light. Brake when you're heavy. And then as the bike comes light, let go of the brakes. And if you need to brake more, brake again when you're heavy. So we are like, we only, the collective we, the awesome we, only brake when we're heavy, and we only corner when we're heavy. So basically, like you can double your weight easily, and that doubles your traction.
I think the rule to live by there, Fatty, is as you feel your suspension compress, if you're riding a suspended bike, or if you feel your tires as they are starting to compress, that's when it's okay to A, either corner, or B, grab some brake to help you slow down. Like I like to aim for braking spots, especially with Powerline, Fatty, as if I see just any bit of little rut or dugout spot or any little up section, where you kind of dip down and come back up, that's a good time to grab a little brake because that stuff is so slippery. If you do it over the crest of those little knolls and knobs, you're just going to end up sliding to your death, maybe. I mean, it really can't get away from you fast there. So you're looking for those little angles to execute braking or do a little cornering there on your Powerline descent.
And the big thing is like, and this is a high level skill, but like the better you are at pumping, and we'll say pumping is the act of modulating the pressure on the bike. The better you are at this, the more traction you can create everywhere. So for example, like if it's it's possible. I imagine that when you're going down this, there's a main line that's more worn in, right? And it's going to be full of people.
For sure.
And if you're catching these people, they're slower than you are, right? So it behooves you to not follow them. I remember when I used to race BMX and 4-cross, like people used to tell me, they're like, dude, you cannot pass somebody when you're following them, right? It's just, it can't be done. So go around them, and you're going to be on fresher dirt. But remember, the better you are at like this oscillation and loading the bike and getting heavy while you brake, the more control you have. And you're going to be able to outbrake the people who are passive on the main line. So again, that's a 0-calorie pass.
Fantastic. And that's a lot more doable, I will say now, than it was a couple of years ago before there was the grading of the power line. There are multiple lines possible on the big, wide open, fast, straight downhill on Powerline. So let's say that, let's go ahead and say that we are now down from Powerline, or even up to the summit of Columbine at that 50-something mile turnaround, and we are ready to come down. And that, I think, is, for almost everyone, the scariest part of the race. You have just finished doing, some riding, some marching for a few miles above 12,000 feet with a couple thousand of your very best friends. Because of the altitude, you're kind of chuckle-headed, and now you are coming down. It is still double track, It is loose rocks, fist-sized loose rocks in some of the corners, and a lot of people who are, staring at their stems, pushing their bikes up, not necessarily completely coherent. If you yell on your left, they might move into your left, right? People make mistakes. I make mistakes there, right? How do you prepare for, how do you execute the Columbine descent?
Well, that's not a place to be a hero, right? You guys have been working your asses off. You get to the top, and it's probably a nice celebration. You're stoked. You're like halfway, right? And it's more or less downhill on the way back. And you're just like, I want to go downhill. If you truly are at the same level as the other people, then just get in the line, dude, and don't do anything fancy. Like when it's time to brake heavy, slow way down before the corners, carry smooth, easy, slow speed. Like the conga line, the line is going to determine your speed. So your only goals are to not create tension in your upper body. That means light hands, and to not crash. So I think if you're truly the same speed as those guys, then that's the way to go. Now, if you're like me, where maybe my descending skills are like about 1,000 times greater than my climbing ability, roughly, then if I would be passing people in the middle. I would go around them.
And I think that you make an absolutely vital point in that if you really are going at the same general speed, just go ahead and stay in line. Generally, there will be 1 or 2 people I pass on the way down, and 4 or 5 people who will pass me on the way down. And I would say, in addition to what you have said, be a good citizen. Call it out loudly and repeatedly, because just like everyone coming down this thing is real focused on themselves and maybe not hearing things as well, or processing things as well as they normally would.
Lee, when people get in traffic, by the way, there's a lot of traffic up here, and they are looking to pass. I mean, obviously your view gets obscure, that is, by the rider in front of you. So do you encourage folks, how do you encourage them to find their line? Is it to look through the rider, look around them, look right at them?
It's a little bit like riding with your buddies on a group. Like, look through them, look between their legs, look to the side of them. Like what I like to do when I'm riding fast, if I'm with someone who's really good, is I like to try to look where he should be looking. So that's a good one. Like, so like Hottie, don't look where you should be looking. If you're on Fatty's wheel, look where Fatty should be looking.
Let's go to the final tricky descent of the day. There are 3 tricky descents of the day, and the last one isn't so much the descent as the fatigue that really make it difficult. So most of us would call the Sugarloaf descent, 84 miles into this race, fun and fast. But the fact is, to get to it, you've just climbed back up the power line, and you are now 84 miles into a grueling, difficult day. You have 84 high altitude miles in your legs, lungs, and brains, and you're exhausted. How do you descend well when you are on fumes, mentally, legs, lungs, everything?
You guys should all put some time into becoming the fastest descender you can possibly be. Like, I understand, you've got a lot of road miles to do and you have your training to do, you know what I'm saying? But you are on a mountain bike a lot. And don't just be like, I'm a dirt roadie, I'm just going to cruise this downhill. Spend time becoming the fastest downhiller you can become. There's a lot of reasons for that, right? One of them is, and it pertains to this, it's the faster your 100% is, the faster your 30% is.
Right.
So there's that answer. And it's analogous to, a lot of times endurance racers don't do a lot of strength work or sprint work, right? But I believe that the stronger your 100 is, the stronger your 30 is. So I think that we should train that speed, so that way you can back way down and still hang with the group or even pass people. So there's that. That's the first answer. The second answer is related to that. It's about becoming highly skilled. And the most important skill, the one we've been talking about, is this idea that you're balanced in the middle of your bike with all your weight in your feet, right? And no weight in your hands and no tension. And if you can do that, you're going to save a gobs of energy. Gobs.
Fantastic. Yeah, so both of these are kind of coming back to be good at descending in Leadville, 85 miles into the race. You need to have practiced and put that as an aspect of your training just the whole season, but it needs to be something that has become a part of all of your training. You have to train your descent, not just your flats and your climbing and your power and your watts and your lungs. Being a confident, skilled descender means that you need to spend some time going downhill. So yeah,
and with focus, with the same kind of focus. Like, let's say you're on the trainer doing sweet spot intervals, like that kind of dedication. And I think it's really fun to descend well.
Yes.
It's really fun. It's really, really gratifying. And who knows, maybe you guys will become ultra endurance enduro racers,
I would love that. So those are the three big parts. And honestly, I mean, we just touched on many of the skills and facets that you have made an art form over decades. And so it's not something that we can just say, hey, we've taught and we're done in a 30-minute conversation about 3 descents. We're going to come back and talk throughout the season, go deep diving into each of these and more with Lee McCormack as a practice, as we start practicing at getting fast on the downhills.
Big thanks again to Lee McCormack. Again, Lee is firing up his personal skills clinics. That's his in-person skills clinic. So you can actually start to look to go see Lee in person, which is great. He will show you the stuff he talked about in this interview. And I will tell you from experience, be prepared to pump your bike. It's Lee's Likes Bike, LeeLikesBike, for all of Lee's coaching classes. Mastering Mountain Bike Skills is the book. It's a terrific companion to have around just in case you can't go see Lee, or even if you do, I tell you, it'll back up everything he says. His book will. And Lee has a bunch of other books too on weight training and intervals that can surely help you become better in the dirt.
Yeah, and like we said, we are super excited to have more from Lee coming up later in other episodes this season. Hottie, here's a weird question for you. Considering, the fact that this is a podcast and we don't use pictures at all, do you use Instagram?
Oh, I do all the time. It is my go-to for posting, in fact. I used it during the GiddyUp Challenge to document each of my baked potato climbs. How about you?
Well, I have an account. I mean, everyone has an account, but apart from occasionally looking at what friends and family are posting, I honestly forget to use it. My photography skills, well, they suck. But, it's... So there's just not a lot I do with Instagram. However, I have been following Attack Pictures, and that's a company that does really cool videos of Crit Series since early April. See, since they, of course, haven't been able to be posting their amazing videos of races, they held a very different kind of contest, which they called the Tournament of Kits. Their idea was super clever. Basically, in quoting here, since we can't decide who is fastest, let's decide who looks fastest. 64 entries were accepted with 1-to-1 bracketed random matchups from the beginning and voting each round. And, of course, one of the entries was our sponsor, DNA Pro Cycling.
In round 1, matched against Moonshot Racing, DNA Pro came out on top.
Yep, and next the DNA Pro Cycling kit went up against Rock Salt Attacker. Once again, DNA Pro Cycling was voted favorite. And then against Team Yacht Club, again, DNA Pro Cycling, best kit.
Now in the Elite 8, DNA Pro was up against Team Feral Cats. I love these names, by the way.
Yeah.
Team Yacht Club, Team Feral Cats. At this point, they are all great-looking kits, but DNA Pro Cycling once again won.
Yeah, you can see where this is heading, right? So in the final four now, Knights of Suburbia were the next kit to fall to DNA Pro Cycling.
And in the grand finale, up against the Legion of LA, state champion, by the way, DNA Pro, that must be Legion of Louisiana, I would say. DNA Pro Cycling's kit was once again the winner.
Yep. And so I guess empirically, up against any kit, DNA wins. Check out the tournament of kits on Attack Pictures Instagram to check out the very nice kits that DNA out-designed. And the great thing is, you can have the same people who designed and created this jersey create your jersey. And we know that because that's exactly what we did for the Leadville podcast kit, which will be coming to you very soon.
DNA can have its champion designers create a custom Italian-sewn kit to show off your club, family, or whatever it is you are promoting. We're big fans of DNA Cycling and are super happy to have them as a partner of the show.
Yep. Have the designers who beat everyone else create a jersey for you and your club. And DNA is offering a 10% discount to our listeners. Just go to dnacycling.com and in the custom apparel inquiry page, choose other in the where did you hear about us drop down, and then type Leadville Podcast.
Have your mask with you when you leave your house. And as long as you're not doing a solitary activity or with your own household, put that mask on always now. And that is a requirement.
All right, Fatty, for this last segment, I have my LA, that's Los Angeles, required mask on. Oh, podcasting. Local government is requiring residents to always have a mask with them when they go out and to wear it whenever they're around people or when they're podcasting. Actually, not when they're podcasting. But first, a little sound check here. How does this sound? Would this make a good podcast, a masked show, if you will?
No. You sound ridiculous. I mean, wearing a mask is not ridiculous, but wearing one in your own home podcast studio is. So please, for the sake of my ears and our listeners' ears, get rid of that thing and make your point.
All right. Okay. You're right. Let me get the loops out from under my headphones here. There we go. Okay. That's actually a homemade mask, by the way, that Mrs. Hottie made. Yeah. You're right, though. I do have a point here. So last show, I talked about wearing a mask while riding on our LA trails and also pointed out my mask during the recent GiddyUp challenge right at the beginning there because the trails are busy and you kind of got to have a mask on. I suppose some folks might be wondering if after reading a recent study on runners and cyclists and floating coronavirus droplets that kind of trail behind those folks, if they too should be wearing a mask. Now, this study was done by a Belgian aerodynamicist, and it basically said that due to the slipstream created by cyclists and runners for that matter, separation from someone on a bicycle moving at 18 miles per hour should be at least 60, not 60 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, the research was done by Bert Blocken. He's a smart guy. He's a civil engineer who has done aerodynamic work for Pro Tour teams. But he is not a virologist. He's not an epidemiologist or an immunologist. And his research was just a white paper. Still, his look at the slipstream and coronavirus droplets went viral, no pun intended. Even Chris Froome retweeted it to his 1.5 million followers. Now, since then, and this was back in late April, there has been some follow-up work, and that's my point here. I hope people will check out the reporting done by Joe Lindsay of Outside Magazine. Now, Joe went and found experts on virus spread who looked at this white paper and concluded that while it is possible for a moving cyclist or runner to create a longer trail of droplets, and that it is possible to come in contact with those droplets moving through said slipstream, it is not certain that infection could occur. In fact, the experts say it is really difficult to determine what the risk is when running in or riding behind a cyclist. Which leaves us in this gray area, of course, like a lot of things through this pandemic. What do we do? Well, the people who understand aerosolized droplets and infection say continue to exercise. But it's not a bad idea to stay out of someone's direct slipstream. Don't be afraid to pass by someone or have someone go by you. Just don't draft. Just don't draft, I think, is the message here. And as far as masks go, which brings me this whole thing full circle here, which is why I started off the segment with a mask on my face. The experts say having a mask at the ready while riding or running is a good idea. Pulling it up, that is, as you come across people, and lowering it while alone to keep airflow maximum and keep the mask a little cleaner is a perfectly good practice in these situations. Again, check out the reporting by Joe Lindsay. He did a terrific job. There's been a lot of unchecked studies and research during this crisis, and it's great to see someone say, hey, wait a second here, and do some follow-up on the panic social media posting that surely follows some of these studies. We'll have links to Joe's reporting and another article, too, about wearing a mask while exercising.
Yeah, we'll make sure to get those in the show notes. And the big takeaway for me is like yours. Don't draft, in particular, strangers, right? It's kind of creepy anyway. So let's wrap up Season 3, Episode 11 of the Leadville Podcast, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. If you like our show, give us a 5-star rating and a review over at Apple Podcasts. We look at every single one of those. So I appreciate those of you who have been posting reviews for us. Also, share it with your other cycling friends, support our sponsors, and let them know that you appreciate them making this little show possible.
Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the Leadville100podcast.com comment section and get in touch. And by the way, we'd really encourage you to do that in these times, especially with the Leadville Trail 100 not happening in the summer. We'd love to know what you folks would like to hear more of, whether it be on this race or other things. Fatty and I are totally open to those things. We do have some ideas brewing, but we want to hear from you too. So please engage. That's also where you can find a link to our Slack workspace, again, for engagement with Fatty and me, and jump into our never-ending Leadville conversation.
Yep. And right now, just sort of an FYI, we are having a very involved conversation about the pros and cons of various GPSs. So come check it out. Get your nerd on. Good luck in training. Thanks for listening. And we're going to see you at the 2021 starting line.
Or bombing down the power line.